Today on the Business Builders podcast, we're discussing the role that resilience plays in building a high-performance team with Kristen Raison, one of the co-founders of PeerThinc. Ron talks about some research that suggests getting out into nature is almost as effective as the drugs prescribed for depression, and I share some very exciting news about the Business Builders podcast's new home. That's right, we now have a studio. Well, welcome to the Business Builders podcast, where each fortnight we bring you insights that will help you succeed in business. We're your hosts. I'm Brenton Gowland.
And I'm Ron Tomlin.
And Ron, we have a home for our podcast now.
Yes, it's fantastic. It's a very nice little studio that you've got organized here in Flinders Street.
Absolutely. And our new sponsor, who we'll talk about a little bit later, who is Borough Markets, has given us space in their offices. We've been looking for a home for the Business Builders podcast for a little while now. And that's part of the reason we haven't been as regular as we are supposed to be, Ron.
Yes, and we promise to be more regular in the future.
That's right. Every 2 weeks we're going to do it. It's been 4 weeks since the last one, but now we have an actual setup where we can have guests. And on that, today we're being joined by Kristen Raison. She's another one of our hosts from the SA Business Builders Network, who obviously major sponsors of this podcast. And Kristen will be talking with us today about how to build a high-performance team by developing resilience in your business. Now, Kristen is an executive coach. She's a facilitator and a global business mentor. She is passionate about supporting leaders to develop engaged and inclusive teams. She has over 25 years' experience advising and operating at executive levels across government, financial services, and SMEs, ranging from executive management, human resources, and leadership to the national lead for people in engagement and culture. That's a lot, isn't it, Ron?
That's a lot. I'd like a resume like that.
So would I. And that's not all, Ron, because Kristen is also a non-executive board director for Asthma Australia and St Andrew's Hospital, and previously with the State Theatre Company SA.
And I've had the privilege of having Kristen join me in my executive coaching groups as a speaker. And I know you've worked with Kristen on some shared clients, Brendan, so I'm sure this is going to be a great conversation today. Not just for us, but for our listeners as well. Mm-hmm. But before we begin, I'd like to make a shout out to our sponsors. We have another new one this week.
That's right. And as we discussed earlier, that is Borough Markets. They've just come on board as a sponsor. Now, Borough Markets are a digital transformation company that exist to level the digital marketing playing field by making enterprise-level digital marketing solutions and technology affordable, accessible, and usable for SMEs, which is fantastic. So if you're looking to grow your business online in what is an incredibly competitive environment, Borough Markets has an excellent track record for helping SMEs do just that in a very affordable way. And they might just be able to help be the catalyst for your growth as well. So please check out our new sponsor, Borough Markets, at boroughmarkets.com.au. That's spelled BOROUGH Markets. There you go.
Great. And we recommend the SA Business Builders Networking Group.
Absolutely we do.
Who we're all a part of.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we haven't had an event for a couple of months due to the ever-changing COVID rules.
Yep.
But we will be starting up again with casual events this month in September.
Fantastic.
So if you're a business leader here in South Australia, please reach out to Brenton or myself on
Kristen.
LinkedIn. Or Kristen. And we'll be talking to you about coming along.
Absolutely. And we'd also like to make a shout out to Nucleus, who are one of our founding sponsors. Make sure you check them out at www.nucleus.com.au.
And finally, we'd like to recommend Adaptco. That's your business, isn't it?
Absolutely. You always save the best for last, don't you?
Now, Adaptco offers outsourced marketing solutions that give people a high-end marketing power without the need to hire a chief marketing officer, which is very expensive. Brenton, you're working with several clients right now to help them find and grow their sales and marketing strategies in order to grow their business.
Yeah, absolutely. Both to grow their business, but also to better service their clients, Ron.
Now, I know as a result of getting in touch with you or trying to, you're incredibly busy. Do you even have room for new clients?
I do. I've been working with a few great clients, but I've got room for probably 2 more at the moment. So look, if you'd like to have a chat about your sales and marketing challenges, or you just want to contact me for a coffee for some advice or whatever, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. And if I can help you, I'd love to, or I'm also happy to point you in the right direction.
Great. And in my opinion, good business really is all about helping each other. And we have a great network of business professionals who can help you with your business challenges. That's what SA Business Builders is all about. And that brings us to our guest, who's in the business of helping clients build resilient teams. Hello, Kristen. It's great to have you on the Business Builders podcast.
Thanks so much for asking me along today, Ron and Brenton. It's been fantastic. I've been really looking forward to today's discussion and I can't wait to get started and listen to some of the questions that you may have for me around building high-performance teams and resilient people.
Awesome.
Let me start you off then, Kristen. Your focus is on building high-performance teams by helping them develop resilient leaders and resilient staff. Now, there's a word that keeps getting bandied around all the time, and I'm talking about the word resilient. It seems to be flavor of the month. Can you talk to us about what resilience is in your view and why it's such an important aspect of building a high-performance team?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you. Great question. And you're right, it is absolutely the buzzword at the moment. There's a real myth around resilience. So we quite often hear people talk about the fact that you're either born with it or you're not. And I'd like to today dispel that myth. It really is like a muscle. So if we think about resilience and how we need to grow that, it's really one of those things where it's more of a state than a trait or a personality trait. So what we need to be thinking about is, how do we work on building our biceps? How do we work on building our abs? It's really similar with resilience. So what we find is for people that have faced some form of, challenge or adversity, it can help build that muscle up. Obviously, it can also be detrimental for people if they've suffered significant trauma. But what we find is for people that have been put through really challenging situations and times, and they've come out of those in a really robust way, it actually helps strengthen the next time it happens. And we saw this a lot actually with the very first round of COVID versus when we went into lockdown the second time. You think about the first time we went into lockdown and how everybody was just beside themselves. When we went back into that next lockdown, we kind of knew what we were doing a little bit more, so we weren't as uptight or stressed about it. So it's very similar with resilience. The more we work on it and focus on it and keep it as a continual conscious state of mind, the more we'll actually be able to build and grow.
What I'm hearing is that you got to go through some sort of challenge or adversity to build that muscle, yes?
Absolutely. And it's really interesting if you look at, children at school that have been, dealt with bullies and horrendous situations sometimes at school. In fact, one of my sons went through tremendous bullying in year 10, and I look at him now today and he has built so much resilience because he's had to work through what some of those coping mechanisms were to really support him to get through those challenging times. So now when a situation comes up where, somebody may be a little bit adverse towards him, he's got that innate way of being able to draw on that inner strength, which we look at as part of his resilience.
I know it's difficult for a person who has so much expertise in this area not to use jargon, but if you had to try and define resilience without jargon, how would you describe it?
Yeah, thanks. That's a really good question, Ron. So really it's all around how we withstand and overcome adversity or unpleasant and difficult events successfully and being able to adapt to them more easily over time. That's a really easy way of describing it. And so when we think about leaders, we need to be there to not only build our own resilience by dealing with challenging situations with the people within our businesses and potentially key stakeholders and things, but we need to be there to support our people as well around building their own resilience in the workplace and at home.
At home?
Yeah, absolutely. If you think about what happens at home, a lot of the time people bring that to work with them, so we see that play out sometimes where we may have a staff member or a colleague where we can see that something's going on with them, but we can't quite work out what it is. And more often than not, it can be something that's happening at home, whether it's an argument with one of their kids, an argument with a loved one, there could be illness in the family and they're bringing that to work. And of course, that impacts their workplace, but it also impacts how they're performing as part of the team.
So just how broadly does resilience go in the workplace then? Because you're talking about also, you've got the home front, which then affects the workplace. You've got situations in the workplace, which obviously then affects the team's mentality and so forth. How far does resilience go in so far as helping build an effective and high-performing team?
It goes right across the remit. We need to be thinking about it daily. Like we use a tool, Resilience at Work, which is a global tool that we're accredited in. It's evidence-based, research-backed. Catherine McEwen, who is from South Australia, was actually the lady behind it and did all of the research on it. And the tool is for us to be able to look at the 7 areas of resilience for an individual.
Right.
And we can use that tool for people across their workplace, but we can also use it for people across their personal lives. It's such an easy to implement tool that we can use it across both at any time.
What then are the 7 areas of resilience then?
Yeah, love it. Great question. So the 7 areas for an individual, the first one is all around living authentically. So this is where we look at, are people playing to their strengths? Are they working and using their core values? If we think about core values, our core values are set and defined by the ages of 3 to 7. So we've all got them. So for me, one of my core values that I hold really tight is all around authenticity. Others, have integrity or honesty as one of their core values. So it's living authentically, and you'll find that if you've got a person in your business that really is working in an area where they're not playing to their strengths, so it could be they're in the wrong role for them. They might be in the right company and it aligns to their core values, but they may actually be in the wrong role.
Right.
You can see that disrupt a team. The next area is around finding your calling. So this is where they feel that their personal values align with the company values.
Yep.
And also they feel like they have purpose in their work. And again, if you think about any roles that we've been in, if you don't feel like you've got that purpose in your work, it can be leading to incongruent outcomes in a workplace or in a team.
So how do you actually get that happening across a whole team to actually, find those people having a mission? Because I would imagine some people will discover their mission is not where they're working. So they need to find
100%.
another bus.
Yep.
And some people would find that it's not the role they're in, and some people would find it's the role. So what does that process look like?
Yeah, so look, we run workshops around helping people understand where they currently sit in their 7 areas of resilience. We can actually complete an individual survey, which takes about 10 minutes. And that's like a diagnostic tool that we can actually then see where they sit, whether it's sitting in an area of strength or whether it's weak. And then from there, we can actually roll out great training sessions with our individuals or our teams to really start to get underneath what that might look like. Angela, my business partner in PeerThinc, does a lot of work with return to work, and she uses this tool a lot with people in that return to work capacity.
Yeah, okay. So that's living authentically is 1, finding your calling is 2, and then I interrupted you with the question. So what's next?
Maintaining perspective is another one. So maintaining perspective is all around how adaptable you are to change or challenges. And if we think about that, quite often it links with mastering stress, which is the next one. So if you think about a person who is under a lot of stress or is really challenged with their stress, quite often their maintaining perspective is really low as well, which means that they're really struggling to work through problems. So they'll be able to identify all of the problems really easily, but rather than being in their frontal cortex and thinking through how they can actually work through these problems and be really quite analytical, they're in their back brain, which is that fight, flight, freeze or fawn stage where they're not able to be optimistic. They're not able to problem solve. And so that's a real challenge for them. So those 2 areas are quite closely linked. Quite often we see if one's down, the other one's down as well.
Yep. Okay.
And then moving on from mastering stress, which again is all around how do you adapt to change when you're stressed? What do you do with that? The next one is interacting cooperatively. Interacting cooperatively is a really interesting one because we often look at people again who, if they are stressed and we think about that fight, flight, freeze and fawn area, we may see people actually retreat. And we saw this through, the last couple of years where when people are really stressed, they want to stay at home and sit on the couch and eat popcorn and watch Netflix, right? So they're not interacting cooperatively. So that area can be quite low. And then what that leads to is isolation. And then that impacts their mental health and their well-being.
And do they shut down in the workplace as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it could play out in things like, they don't want to be around anybody. They decline social, team social events. It could be that they're quite emotional. They may be, quite weepy.
That then tends to affect the whole workplace.
Absolutely.
So that culmination of things in a person's life then affects everyone else because you're in the workplace.
And I take it that these things are interacting with each other as well, because as we're going through these, I'm thinking about the current situation where you have external stressors like the ambiguity of lockdowns and not knowing when we're going to be in a lockdown and how long the lockdown's going to be. So maintaining perspective becomes more difficult during those times. And therefore, I'm suspecting that interacting cooperatively becomes more difficult as well.
Absolutely. And then what that then leads to is the last one, which I'll skip over one and go to the next one, which is building networks. If you then think about building networks, those people that then isolate themselves aren't building networks. And so they're not surrounded by their tribe or the people that are there to help support them.
So I'm assuming that building networks, that's about a support mechanism for yourself and the business networking kind of thing.
Correct.
So how does, just out of interest, because I know that there's a million questions coming into my head while you're going through these points, but how does then the normal employee, when we talk about a high performing team, we want everyone to be doing really well. How does a normal employee who's at their desk every day build a network that's going to help them?
Yeah. So the network doesn't always necessarily need to be an internal staff member. It could actually be the people that are around them outside of work. So if you think about family, friends, colleagues, potential past people that, you've had in your networks that you trust and can rely on, it's making sure that that's a really sound group of people that are really there to support you and wrap their arms around you when you're going through these adverse situations.
And you can advise people in the workspace to actually do that and help them learn how to do that if they don't know how already.
Absolutely. And, it's really interesting. I look at introverts quite often when you mention the word networking, they seize up and that's, the last thing they want to do. They want to run for the hills. So it's giving them the tools to understand how to engage with other people by potentially picking somebody that they trust and value within their workplace that can almost be like their wing person so that they can go to an event and they feel comfortable that they've got somebody there that they can go along with. The main thing is that they don't pick another introverted person because we all have seen that through SA Business Builders where if you've got two introverts that walk into a room, quite often they're the two standing in the corner talking to each other and aren't meeting new people. So you want to be really targeted around who those people are in your networks. And then the last one is staying healthy, which generally is the first one to go, to be perfectly honest. We see this a lot in the high level C-suite. So we see it a lot in the CEO space where, the CEOs or business owners get really, really busy and very invested in their business or their company. And so their diet goes down the toilet. They don't sleep properly. They're up at, burning the candle at both ends. We also see that, they're not getting exercise. So they'll be sitting at a desk rather than actually getting out and getting exercise and some fresh air. And it's just amazing what can happen if you get outside and just get, even 15 minutes of fresh air if you're feeling a little stressed or, you're looking at your perseverance and your optimism and it's not there. Put your tools down and just go for a walk.
Well, I know we talk about that a lot at different executive coaching sessions. I guess you would hear that a lot in your tech groups, Ron.
And going back to what Kristen was saying, evidence-based, there's a lot of evidence and a lot of research to show that exercise and getting out into nature is as effective as the drugs that are prescribed for depression. So
absolutely,
stop it now, before it manifests itself in all sorts of behaviors and thoughts, and get out there and make sure that you're healthy.
And if you find yourself making that the first thing that you do give up when you're stressed, get yourself a buddy that's actually going to hold you accountable. So for me, I made sure that I teamed up with another friend of mine and we do Pilates 3 times a week and we hold each other to account. So there are days where I've had a lot on my plate and I think, this is the last thing that I feel like doing. And the next minute she's driving in my driveway, tooting the horn going, I'm here to pick you up, we're going. And so it's actually, again, and that comes through you building networks, right? And you're interacting cooperatively. If you've got that person that can keep you in check, it's fantastic.
Yeah. And so working on those things, all of these 7 points, and I'll just go through them because I conveniently wrote them down: living authentically, finding your calling, maintaining perspective, interacting cooperatively, staying healthy, and building networks. It kind of all works together, all those things, to build resilience within your team. But I would imagine as a boss, as a CEO, because a lot of what we do here on the SA Business Builders podcast is talk to people about growing their teams. How do you get to a point where you can really start to build this within your team? Because of course they haven't got you in there yet, and they're wanting to make some inroads into building resilience within their team by doing, the things that you've spoken about here. How do they get their staff to a position where this can happen?
It's building trust. So it all comes back to being a really trusted leader. So if you think about any leader that you may have worked with in the past, if you've built a background of trust within a team, then they're more comfortable and confident to actually talk about what is impacting them, whether it's in or outside of work. So be really open and trusting with your people around your conversations would be one of my tips is, start to learn and understand them more about being people rather than staff members or employees, getting to know what motivates them, what are their values, because the more we understand each other as humans, the more we want to actually, tell people what's going on in our lives because we feel safe.
Or help other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about it, you look at a team where there's that robust trust in a team versus a team that doesn't have it. A robust, trusted team generally will have the indicators of being a high performance or will be on the path to high performance, whereas a team where the trust is really eroded or has never been there, you're really going to struggle to have high performance in that team.
So what are the symptoms that resilience needs to be worked on within an organisation? Because obviously the trust part is a lot softer start than just putting people through challenges, because trust then engenders the ability for people to talk. So, and this is maybe a leading question, I don't mean it to be, but what are the symptoms that leaders and business people need to look out for that it's just a warning sign that resilience needs to be worked on? Yeah,
look, there's quite a few. If we think about the above the line and below the line conversations in a team, above the line is where there is safety. People are comfortable to raise problems and come to the table and offer solutions or suggestions. Or, you'll see a team that'll innovate where all of it's above the line. If it's below the line, this is your gossiping, water cooler conversation. There's a lack of courageous conversations going on in a business. We quite often see that with a team or a team where the leader isn't having courageous conversations with their people. Quite often it's leader-led, so the team then won't also front into those courageous conversations. So they're probably the two really big ones that we see a lot. Another one could be around sick leave. If you start to see people taking time off from work, or presenteeism is another really big one, where they're present, but they're not actually effective or productive.
So they're present but not present.
Correct. Yeah, they're warming a seat, but they're not really achieving a great deal more.
Yeah, and that then creates jealousies and issues with other people.
That's right.
So, Kristen, we're all about delivering practical and useful advice for business building people on this podcast. What are your top tips? What are the things that people can do themselves to actually make a difference in terms of building resilience?
Yeah, so the first one from a leadership point of view would be to open up conversations and start to really be authentic in your leadership style. Show care and empathy for your people. It's a really challenging time at the moment, and now more than ever, we need empathetic leaders. This is not the time to be really, really tough on people, because everybody, no matter what is happening in the world, everybody's got a story, and we need to be connecting with our people more. We need to also listen to understand it. We don't want them to just listen. We want the leaders to listen to understand their people, to know what's going on at home even. That's a really big one that we see. Leaders will say, I'm listening, but it's, are you really listening? Are you really listening to what your people are telling you? Find out their values. And then what you can actually also do is think about how you're building some resourcefulness within a team. So empower people. If you've got people in your team that you're empowering, they will become resourceful, and a resourceful team is a productive team. Think about also introducing some self-care into the team. So it might be where once a week the team goes for a walk and grabs a coffee, or they could do a coffee mentoring catch up as a sales meeting, for example, rather than sitting in the office doing a sales meeting around a desk. The sun's out, get outside and go for a walk and actually have a walking, talking meeting. So they're just a couple of really simple things that you can be doing.
Yeah.
And then the last one would be all around, as a leader, making sure that you are sharing what the goals are and the purpose are for the business, so that everybody becomes connected and aligned, because clear is kind. We hear Brene Brown talk about that in all of her podcasts and her books. Clear is kind.
So there's a theme coming out in all this, and a lot of it revolves around communication.
Absolutely.
Now, you talked about finding out what your people's values are. That's not an easy conversation to have, and not one that comes up daily. How would you broach that subject with someone?
Build it into your one-on-one conversations with your people. And if you're not having one-on-one conversations with your people regularly, start having them. Because how do you get to know your people if you're not actually having one-on-one conversations? It sounds really simple, but the number of businesses I go into and say, right, what's your operating rhythm? How are you going with your monthly one-on-ones? Where are you hearing things from your people? And they kind of look at me like I've just turned into Shrek. And it's actually thinking through, right, I need to actually get an operating rhythm and start to have these really open, honest conversations and listen to their people.
Now, you've talked a lot about building teams and building resilient teams and this whole concept of resilience and what leaders can do. But as a leader, if you're falling apart, it's not going to do the team any good. And I'm a great fan of believing that you model the behaviors you want your team to adopt. So what can we do individually as business leaders to become more resilient so that we can lead our teams, but so that we can model that sort of behavior too?
Yeah, fantastic question. I agree. You can't drink from an empty cup. So you need to be making sure that you're filling your cup up, because if your cup's empty, you can't help anyone else. So the big thing, and I'm going to give us a bit of a plug here, reach out to us. We are working with leaders across every sector and industry around Australia and around the world. Angela and I are linked in through the Resilience at Work team and the consortium. So we work across the UK, New Zealand, Northern America, Canada, obviously Australia. So reach out to us. It's a really easy way that we can actually survey you as an individual to see where you currently sit on your 7 areas of resilience. And it's not expensive, just invest that little bit of time in really starting to work on how you are looking after yourself and your well-being.
Yep. So you work with both individuals and then teams.
And leaders. Yep.
Okay. So, but practically speaking, getting back to something I can do as a result of listening to this podcast, what would you recommend?
Reach out. Yep, absolutely. Reach out to Angela or myself. If you're wanting to do something today, just sit down and just think about those 7 areas that I've highlighted and think about where you may actually rate yourself on the 7 areas, and especially the staying healthy one. That's a big one. If you're finding that you're fairly stressed out, just have a bit of a look at what you're doing with your diet, your sleep and your exercise. It's a really good place to start. And as I mentioned earlier, it's the first one that generally gets pushed to the side because we haven't got time for exercise.
Yeah, and just to highlight how important this is, have you got any case studies, without naming the businesses, just of a before and after, like what this can actually do for an organisation?
Yes, absolutely. We work really, really closely at the moment with the health sector. And obviously we're seeing a lot of challenge in that space at the moment. So what we do with the people that we work with and the teams, we actually do the survey when we first start working with them. And then 6 months later, we then resurvey each individual to see where they're currently sitting. And we can then measure the outputs or the outcomes of how those tools have helped them. So we can actually do that at any time. And the success has been phenomenal, to the point where our work is just continually being brought in through referrals because we've got great live examples of where it's worked really effectively and people are starting to feel great. In regards to Angie, has even had a lady who she's been working with who ended up going in after 9 months of not being able to get work and in a really bad place in Victoria, has now given herself a complete makeover. And honestly, she looks like she's about 20 years younger. She looks amazing. So if you get yourself into, really starting to think about how you work on your own well-being, it can.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things you mentioned in there, one of the 7 points was maintaining perspective. And I think right at the moment, that's hard to do when you're being bombarded by news, newsprint, radio, television, about how bad things are here, how bad things are overseas. I think one of the things about maintaining perspective is realizing the whole world is not about COVID at the moment. And maybe switching off from some of those continual bad news stories and realizing that, the sun's still shining. There's still people who care about you around you. There's still business to be done. And so detaching yourself from the continual news feed that's coming in is a way of getting some perspective and maintaining a reasonable, balanced perspective rather than letting it all heap upon you as a leader.
Absolutely. And we actually recommend that as part of what we talk about. It is absolutely shutting down the news. If you have to have the news on, put it on once and then turn it off. You don't need to be watching all of that negativity play out. The other thing that we talk about a lot is looking at the circles. So looking at your circle of control and circle of influence and actually staying in those spaces rather than looking at the circle that's outside of your control or areas of concern. Look at the area that you can control, pick that first. Pick a couple of things and knock them off, because what we're also seeing a lot of at the moment is change fatigue, where businesses are having to constantly be nimble and adapt, and that's impacting their people, and they are getting change fatigue. So by giving them some really simple tools around just focus on the things that you can control for now and tick them off, and then come next to the areas of influence, and that just helps them gain that little bit of perspective and optimism.
Yeah, so there's some really great things there. And look, just capping off again, those 7 things that Kristen was talking about were living authentically, finding your calling, maintaining perspective, interacting cooperatively, staying healthy, and building networks. Now, Kristen, if people want to contact you, what's the best way for them to reach out to you at PeerThinc?
Yeah, so contact at Peer, which is PeerThinc.com, or on my mobile, which is 0488 440 500.
No worries at all. Kristen, thank you very much for your time today. It's a very insightful conversation and very timely, of course, with everything that's going on in the world at the moment. Now, as Ron mentioned earlier, I've been working with Kristen on some shared clients and have seen firsthand the difference that her assistance makes at a practical level to the businesses that she works with. So if you need help to work on your team and to improve their performance, or even if you just need help yourself, I'd highly recommend having a discussion with Kristen.
Fantastic. So if you're enjoying the Business Builders podcast and you're finding it useful, please let us know. We'd love your thoughts, and we'd love to know about any topics you'd like us to talk about in the future. You can reach us on LinkedIn by contacting Brenton Garland or Ron Tomlin. We'd love to chat. Mm-hmm. We'd also love you to bring us a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcasting platform.
Absolutely. And please remember to check out our sponsors. So SA Business Builders, of course. If you want to come along to our next event, contact Ron, myself, or Kristen Raison on LinkedIn. Please visit our new sponsor, Borough Markets, at boroughmarkets.com.au, or visit Nucleus at www.nucleus.com.au. Or, of course, if you'd like my help improving the sales and marketing of your business through AdaptCo, just reach out to me via LinkedIn, and I'd love to catch up for a coffee.
And I hear you have a website coming.
Yes, indeed, but I'm focusing on my clients first, so give me a few more weeks.
Yeah, those clients are important, so I'll have to wait for the update at our next podcast.
Absolutely. And until then, it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me. And Kristen, we'll see you at the next SA Business Builders event.
Thank you so much for having me along. I've really enjoyed today. It's been fabulous.
Yeah, great. Our pleasure, Kristen. And to our listeners, we look forward to speaking with you again on our next podcast, which will be in 2 weeks, Ron.
Yes, it will.
We now have a home.
Yes. See you next time, and bye for now.
Bye for now.